Hi, I'm Carlina. My parents called my wedding cheap because it was in our backyard. They said it was embarrassing for them, so they didn't come. Not even a call on the day. But here's what they didn't know. I filmed it. And 2 weeks later, the world saw what they didn't bother to show up for. They said it was just a potluck. But why did it go viral? Why did strangers cry, watching what my own mother called a shame? And what happened after? That's where it really begins. Do you want to know how far a family will go to erase you if you don't perform their version of love? Because mine didn't just stay home. They rewrote the story, without me. It started with a phone call. I was sitting on the back steps, mug of lukewarm tea cupped in both hands, watching the last bit of sun settle into the tree line. The porch light hadn't flicked on yet, but I didn't mind the dim. There was something comforting about the in-between hour, before the dark fully arrived, but long after the day had let go. My phone buzzed against my thigh. Mom. I hesitated. That alone says everything. When I answered, her voice was sharp, clipped, like she'd already made up her mind before I picked up. A backyard? She said. Really, Carlina? That's not a wedding. That's for poor people. She didn't wait for me to respond. She didn't ask who I was marrying. She didn't ask how I was. Click. It took me a full minute to realize she'd ended the call. I just sat there, phone in hand, the edges digging into my fingers. Tea forgotten. No argument. No concern. Not even an ounce of curiosity. She heard backyard, and that was enough for her to dismiss the whole thing, me included. The wind picked up and rustled the leaves of the old maple that towers over the yard. I looked out at the open space, already picturing the string lights I'd been collecting from thrift stores, the chairs borrowed from neighbors, the wildflower beds I planned to replant with Reuben next weekend. She didn't see any of that. She didn't want to. A few days later, Sonia and I met at a cafe on Merrimon for coffee. She pushed her phone across the table without a word. A Facebook meme. One of those passive-aggressive jokes you recognize instantly even if they come from a faceless profile. It was a picture of a homemade wedding invitation. Craft paper, pressed lavender, twine bow, hand-lettered names. My invitation. The caption read, "When a homeschool project thinks it's a real wedding." I stared at it for a long time. No name was tagged, but I didn't need one. My mom had made a fake profile years ago to keep an eye on people, as she put it. She used it to post comments she didn't want traced back to her. She always said she hated drama, but that was only true when she wasn't the one orchestrating it. Sonia looked at me like she expected a reaction. I didn't give her one. I just nodded, finished my coffee, and deleted the app on the spot. That evening, back at home, Reuben handed me a bowl of soup and asked how my day had been. I hesitated before telling him about the call, about the meme. He didn't ask what I was going to do. He didn't tell me to ignore her, or to forgive her, or to confront her. He just let the silence settle and said softly, "She didn't even ask who you're marrying?" I shook my head. "Then she's not objecting to your choices," he said. "She's mourning her lost spotlight." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The comment wasn't meant to hurt, but it hit something tender. Because he was right. It wasn't about me getting married. It was about her not being center stage. No ballroom, no 3-tier cake with edible gold, no photographer to catch her pretending to cry in a tailored dress. That night, I sat outside again. This time, wrapped in a sweater, notebook balanced on my knees. The wind had died down, and the stars began to pierce through the soft veil of night. I opened to a clean page and started sketching a layout of the backyard. Chairs would go in a semicircle facing the wildflowers. The buffet table near the shed. Paper lanterns strung between the trees. This space would never be a ballroom. And that's exactly why I loved it. I paused, pen hovering, and looked out again into the dark. I whispered to the stillness, not sure who I was talking to. My mother, myself, maybe something in between. She didn't have to understand. She just had to show up. But I already knew she wouldn't. And I hadn't told anyone yet that I'd been removed from the group chat. Not even Ruben. The sketchbook was still open on my lap the next morning. The pen slipped down into the spine like it had given up too. I had fallen asleep on the couch, not even making it to bed. The sky had lightened into that gray-blue wash, birds just starting their fussy chorus in the hedges. Ruben was already up. He always was. I heard the low murmur of the kettle on the stove, but I didn't move. When I finally stretched and sat up, I grabbed my phone to check the time. That's when I noticed it. My notifications were fewer than usual. No new messages from the family thread. That alone didn't say much. My family's energy came in unpredictable waves, but the silence felt curated. I opened the app and saw it. The group was gone. Not just muted, not archived, not renamed. Gone. A new one had been made, a smaller circle. Same people, minus me. The title, Bridal Brunch, Post-Wedding Plans, just us. I read it twice, then clicked on the participant list. Mom, Lynn, Aunt Cheryl, a few cousins I hadn't seen in years. The usual family orbit, just tighter now, with me excluded like a typo they decided not to correct. I didn't cry. That part of me had dried up a long time ago, I think. The kind of tears you cry when someone forgets your birthday or misspells your name. Those were gone. This was quieter than that. This was surgical. Instead, I stood up slowly, rinsed my face in the sink, and opened the bag of dried eucalyptus I'd bought to wrap the centerpiece jars. If I had time to bleed, I had time to finish these. By late afternoon, the apartment smelled like rosemary and dried citrus peel. Ruben came in, kissed the top of my head, and offered to take over dinner. I let him. I told him I needed a minute to gather my thoughts, but I lied. I just needed to be alone. I went upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened the Notes app on my phone. New note, blank page. Title, Erased but Present. I began writing, not a speech, not a journal entry, a list. A list of all the times I'd been included, only in utility. Background, logistics, never spotlight, never celebration. Thanksgiving 2019, asked to carve the turkey, but not sit at the head table. Lynn's baby shower, designed the invites, not invited to the photo wall. Dad's retirement, paid for half the catering, listed in the program as guest. The list went on. I stopped counting after 15 entries. I stared at it and thought, when someone disappears enough times, you stop asking why. You start rehearsing how to explain it without sounding bitter. Later that evening, I was folding linens when my phone rang again. The screen lit up with Lynn's name. My stomach clenched, but I answered. "Hey," she said, like she was calling from a drive-thru. "Mom's worried about you." I stayed silent. She says you're pulling back from the family, that you're sabotaging your own wedding because you're afraid of being seen. I could hear a faint car blinker in the background. I imagined her sitting at a stoplight, casually diagnosing me with a personality defect in between errands. "She said that?" I asked finally. "Yeah, but I told her that's not fair," Lynn added quickly. "You've always been more private, not like me." I put her on speaker, laid the phone down on the nightstand, and let her words fill the room like a commercial I couldn't skip. She went on, something about how she wanted to help, how she hated seeing the family divided, how maybe I was just overwhelmed. When she finally stopped talking, I said 2 words. "Thanks, Lynn." Then I ended the call. There was nothing else to say. I didn't need an apology she'd never offer. I didn't need to explain myself again to people who'd already written the script for who I was supposed to be. After cleaning up downstairs, I returned to the living room, where my sketchbook still lay on the table. The pages smelled faintly of citrus and graphite. I flipped past my original diagram and turned to a fresh sheet. This time, I didn't sketch lighting. I drew chairs. 25 of them. Each one different. Folding metal, wood with chipped arms, 2 small benches I borrowed from neighbors. Every line was deliberate, and next to each chair, I began writing names. Sonia, Ruben, Aunt Lorraine, My friend from work who cried with me in the break room last year. People who showed up, who stayed, who didn't ask for spotlight or proof. There was one chair I left empty, not by mistake, just to remind myself that not every absence is a tragedy. Some are just space reclaimed. I left the sketchbook open that night, didn't bother closing it or turning the page. I just stood, stretched my back, and walked slowly to the kitchen. There were still 2 candles burning on the counter, one eucalyptus, one something Reuben picked out that smelled like cedar and honey. I let them flicker a while longer, poured a glass of water, and leaned against the sink, staring through the window into the night. My eyes drifted back to the page in my head, the chair I'd left unnamed, and that's when I remembered the other chair. Not mine, not really, but the one they assigned me years ago, the last time our family gathered around a wedding. Lynn's wedding, 5 years ago. It was held in Raleigh at a venue so polished it looked like a showroom, the kind of place where even the curtains cost more than my monthly rent. I had been involved from the beginning, not as a guest, but as help. Quiet, reliable, always reachable. I managed the schedule, handled the caterer's last-minute crisis, made sure the DJ didn't play the wrong version of the father-daughter song. My clipboard never left my side. When I asked if I could be included in the bridal portraits, Mom blinked and said, "Oh, honey, you're not part of the party, you're logistics." That word, logistics, followed me all night. I wore black flats because I knew I'd be running. I wore a dress shirt instead of something satin because I knew no one would be waiting to photograph me anyway. I was the one who stood behind the florist during setup, checking things off the master checklist while everyone else popped champagne in silk robes. Dinner started late, and I remember being handed a plate in the hallway. I looked at the name cards scattered across elegant tables draped in gold-threaded linen. I wasn't on any of them. I found a seat at the far corner. My place card said, Table 9, Kids and Overflow. Someone had scribbled Carlina in pen below it, like an afterthought. I didn't leave, I didn't protest. I smiled at the children, passed rolls, and helped the venue staff reset the salad course when one of the trays spilled near the entrance. At one point during the night, Linda pulled me aside. She adjusted her necklace and said, "You're doing amazing, sweetheart. Everyone keeps saying how seamless everything feels. You're a natural. Not everyone's meant for the spotlight, you know. Some people are just really good at support." She meant it as a compliment. I accepted it like a contract. A few months later, someone tagged me in a photo from the wedding. I hadn't even realized they'd taken my picture. In it, I was crouched by the cake table, wiping down spilled champagne with paper towels. I was mid-laugh, probably something the bartender had said as he stepped around me. The caption read, "Shout out to the catering crew. Y'all were amazing." I wasn't on the catering team. No one corrected the tag. No one in my family even commented, not, "Oops, that's Carlina," not, "She organized the whole thing." Nothing. I didn't untag myself. I didn't delete it. I let it stay. A little square box of proof that I existed exactly how they liked me. Quiet, helpful, not quite belonging. I sat back down on the couch with my laptop, opened my photo folders, and scrolled through the album from that day. Dozens of pictures. Lynn's train flowing down the stairs, the father-daughter dance, the bouquet toss. None of them included me. I deleted the whole folder, all but one image, the one where I'm crouched on the floor in my flats, hands full of napkins. I saved it in a new album titled Receipts. Then I opened a blank document and typed the title, What They Don't Remember. Not because I planned to send it, not because I wanted revenge, but because memory, when controlled by the wrong hands, becomes a weapon, and I wasn't going to let them write the next chapter without at least one record of how it actually happened. I stared at the title on the blank document, What They Don't Remember, for a long time before typing anything else. Just letting the cursor blink against the white screen. My fingers hovered, not out of hesitation, but calculation. I wasn't sure what would land on that page yet, but I knew this. It wouldn't be a rant. It would be evidence. Because if there's one thing I've learned about the people who hurt you in plain sight, it's that they'll rewrite the details before you even have time to react. I closed the document for now and stood from the couch. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows through the kitchen window. I walked over to the table and began sorting through a small stack of papers I'd left there days ago. What started as a casual effort to organize wedding expenses turned into something uglier the deeper I went. My browser was still open to the loan pre-approval site. I needed financial clarity before we confirmed the final guest count. That's when I saw it. An old PayPal transfer I didn't remember authorizing. Then another, and another. Florist, event planner, photographer. Every one of them tied to Lynn's wedding, and everyone paid from my account. I blinked hard, then opened my email to cross-reference the receipts. All the confirmation emails had been forwarded to Linda. The few partial refunds, deposits canceled due to a vendor change, had gone to her as well. She hadn't just used me. She'd used my money, my credit, my silence. I started printing, not out of impulse, out of necessity. Each sheet that slid from the printer felt like peeling back another layer of polite fiction. The version of me they were happy to maintain, generous, quiet, agreeable, was beginning to feel like a costume someone else had sewn onto me. One they didn't want me to outgrow. Just as the last page landed in the tray, my phone buzzed with a reminder I'd set months ago. Call the bank. Ask about the overdraft from last year. I hadn't thought about it since I covered the charge without question. But now, something itched in the back of my mind. I called and waited through the hold music. When the representative picked up, I asked for the record on the failed transaction. There it was. A declined payment to Magnolia Florals, dated the same week Lynn's vendor had changed last minute. The deposit had been returned, and immediately withdrawn again. By Linda. I thanked the rep, ended the call, and stared at the ceiling. The shame that crept up wasn't from being taken advantage of. It was from realizing I'd let it happen, over and over, because it was easier to be the one who cleaned up than the one who caused a scene. That evening, Sonia called. I answered on the second ring. "You okay?" she asked, no preamble. "I've been better," I replied, pinching the bridge of my nose. There was a short pause. Then she said it. "You still planning to do everyone's work for free?" I let out a breath through my nose. More acknowledgement than laughter. I guess not anymore. The next morning, I was scrolling through a local wedding blog over breakfast. Just background noise while I sipped coffee. That's when I saw it. A feature on effortless backyard elegance. The headline showed Lynn's wedding. Her name was in bold. The subhead described her as a visionary bride who handcrafted every detail. The guest welcome table caught my eye. The wood was reclaimed. The lettering on the signs had taken me 4 evenings. The herb bundles? I grew them, hung them, tied them with linen ribbon. The caption underneath read, "Styled entirely by the bride, Lynn's creative fingerprints were everywhere." Reuben walked in just then. He saw my face before I said anything. "What happened?" I turned the screen toward him. "You want me to comment?" he asked, voice flat. "No," I said, still staring at the screen. I want to remember exactly how they rewrite things when it suits them. That night, after he'd gone to bed, I sat in the living room with my laptop. I opened a new folder. Exhibit A, Contributions Never Credited. One by one, I uploaded screenshots, payment confirmations, text threads, pictures of the things I made, before they were renamed as Lynn's. I didn't name the files with anger. I labeled them by truth, not for revenge, for record-keeping. Because even if I never showed them to anyone, I needed to know I wasn't imagining the way they erased me. And it was in that moment, watching the progress bar fill as each file uploaded, that I realized something important. Even then, after all of it, I had still been giving them the benefit of the doubt. I had still believed they just didn't see me. I hadn't realized they chose not to. The next morning came slowly, wrapped in a strange quiet. I woke up to the soft clinking of dishes, Reuben in the kitchen. The smell of cinnamon toast drifted down the hallway, but I didn't move right away. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned overhead. The line from Linda's message still echoed in my mind. Is this the wedding I wasn't invited to? It wasn't a question. It was a setup, a trap wrapped in feigned innocence. And I wasn't stepping into it. When I finally got up and wandered out, Reuben handed me a mug and said nothing. We had that kind of rhythm. He knew when I didn't need advice. I needed space. We stood in the kitchen for a while, sipping coffee, just breathing. By late afternoon, the yard had transformed. The folding chairs were arranged, everyone tied with a strip of faded linen or ribbon someone had donated. The long wooden table we'd sanded down together gleamed under the shade. Wildflowers in glass jars dotted every surface. It looked like a postcard, but better, because every piece had a fingerprint, a hand behind it. I walked around the setup, checking the final details. 25 seats. I counted again, not because I needed to, but because something about the number calmed me. None of those chairs belonged to my mother, or my father, or my sister. And for the first time, that fact didn't sting. It felt honest. People began arriving just before sunset. Friends from work, Sonia with her camera already in hand, 2 neighbors who had lent us chairs and offered to bring peach cobbler. Nobody made a scene. No one asked where my family was. When Reuben stepped out onto the path in his simple navy suit, I caught my breath. There was no orchestra, no bridal march, just the wind through the trees and the quiet murmur of people standing. I walked barefoot across the grass. Not a single guest pulled out their phone. It was as if the moment demanded presence. When I reached him, Reuben smiled. Not the camera kind, but the one he gave me when I snuck him the last slice of pie, or when I leaned into his chest during storms. His hands were warm when he took mine, and he didn't look away once. There was no officiant, no script. He spoke first. I didn't know what home was until I saw you standing barefoot in this yard. A pause. A laugh, soft and cracked. You make everything grow. My throat tightened. I could have repeated the vows I'd written. I could have tried to be poetic. But instead, I looked around, at the people who showed up, at the table we'd built, at the string lights Reuben hung over hours of sweaty afternoons, and I said, I stayed quiet long enough to be mistaken for invisible. But I am not. There was no applause. Not right away. Just stillness. And then a ripple of clapping that wasn't polite. It was proud. Like the sound of people watching something take root. We ate by candlelight. The food was served family style. Bowls passed from one end of the table to the other. Laughter wrapped itself around the yard like smoke. Sonia caught everything with her camera, but I never noticed her moving. It was as if she'd turned herself into part of the setting. Later that night, after the last guest had hugged me goodbye and the dishes were soaking in the kitchen, I sat on the porch with Reuben. We didn't say much. He held my hand, and I leaned against his shoulder. That kind of quiet was earned. A few days passed. The glow lingered like an aftertaste. I didn't post anything right away. Hadn't planned to post at all. But Sonia sent me a 90-second edit she'd cut together as a gift. It was perfect. It started with Reuben fixing his tie in the mirror, then cut to me tying the last ribbon on a jar of flowers. There was no music, just wind and birds and soft footsteps. It ended with us dancing under the paper lanterns, barefoot, the grass beneath us and the stars above. I uploaded it with no caption, no hashtags. Just, home, love, October 8th. By the next morning, it had over 24,000 views. By that afternoon, a wedding blog had messaged me asking for permission to feature it. I didn't tell my family. I didn't send it to them. I didn't even mention it when Aunt Cheryl texted, "Your little wedding is making rounds online." Didn't expect that. I simply copied the message and pasted it into my document. What they don't remember. That night, as I closed my laptop and turned off the light, my phone buzzed again. Linda, one line. Is this the wedding I wasn't invited to? No greeting, no punctuation. Just the kind of message meant to sound hurt, but hit like a dare. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I copied her words and pasted them beneath the others. Then I shut the file, closed the laptop, and turned off my phone. I left my phone face down on the counter. Didn't turn the screen off. Just let it sit there, buzzing a few more times before it gave up. By the time Reuben came home, the house smelled like lemon oil and something slightly burnt. I'd forgotten about the tea I was steeping until the water had evaporated and the bag crisped against the bottom of the pot. He raised an eyebrow when he walked in, looked at the blackened kettle, and said, "Rough day?" I nodded, and that was all the answer he needed. That night, after dinner and dishes, and Reuben asleep on the couch, with a throw blanket half slipping off his shoulders, I checked my email one last time. Nothing from family, but a forwarded voicemail appeared from Lorraine. No subject, just a winking emoji and the audio file. I put in my headphones and hit play. It was a recording of Linda talking to someone, probably a distant cousin or one of those holiday-only acquaintances who circle back when something makes noise online. "Well, she never made it clear it was going to be that kind of event," my mother's voice said, brittle and rushed. "You know, with cameras and all that. I thought it was a backyard potluck or something." Then a pause. "I just didn't think it was worth making a fuss over." The audio ended there. Just 22 seconds. Lorraine had attached one sentence beneath the file. "She's spinning stories again." I didn't reply. I saved it in the folder. Gave it a new label, Deflect, Audio. The next morning, while eating toast over the sink, I finally responded to one of Lorraine's texts. "Why didn't you come?" I asked, short and direct. Her answer came an hour later. "I was going to. I packed a dress and everything, but your mom told me not to. Said it would only confuse things and that you didn't want outsiders there. I didn't want to overstep." My fingers tightened around the phone. For months, I'd assumed some people just hadn't cared enough to show. But Linda hadn't trusted anyone who might challenge her version of events. She'd kept the circle tight on purpose. She didn't want witnesses. I didn't respond. I copied the message, pasted it into the document, and added a new heading above it. Managed absence. Later that week, I met Sonia at the coffee shop we always used for catch-ups. She brought her laptop and a flash drive. "I've got extra footage from the wedding," she said casually, sipping her drink. "There's a few wide shots of the chairs, a couple moments when you were adjusting someone's tie, wiping something off Reuben's cheek. Totally beautiful. But also, you can see who wasn't there. You want me to put something together? A follow-up?" I paused, thought about it, and then shook my head. "No. Let them think the damage is cosmetic. That's what they always cared about anyway." She smiled, not surprised. "You sure?" "Yeah. I'm not trying to prove anything. I just want the noise to stop." On my way home, I opened my email app and clicked Compose. I didn't write to Linda. I wrote to Lynn. Subject line, none. Body. "Since we're both pretending things didn't happen, let me give you one more thing to ignore. I'm not angry that you took credit. I'm not surprised Mom gave it to you. What I am is tired. So here's the line. I'm done carrying the weight for a story I wasn't allowed to write. You don't owe me an apology, but you do owe yourself the truth." I didn't send it. I saved it to drafts, closed the tab, and let it sit. That night, I received a message request on Instagram. It was from one of Linda's friends, the type of woman who wore matching scarves with her dogs, and referred to Botox as preventative maintenance. The message read, "Linda says you're spreading lies and trying to humiliate her. She's heartbroken. I hope you're proud of yourself." I stared at it for a long time. The phrasing, the performance, the same tired lines. "You're overreacting. You're exaggerating. You're the problem." No one ever asked what Linda did, only how I made her look. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot, saved it as Deflect, Instagram. Then I opened my notes app and wrote 2 lines. "I used to clean up their messes. Now I just archive them." The message from Linda didn't make me cry. It didn't even make me mad. not the kind of mad that rises in your throat and turns into shouting. It was colder than that, like when you realize a wound you thought had healed was never stitched properly. It's not the pain that surprises you, it's how familiar it feels. Reuben came home late that night. He was tired, covered in the scent of sawdust and motor oil from helping his cousin patch up a busted garage door. I told him dinner was in the fridge and poured him a glass of water. We didn't talk about my mother. We didn't have to. Silence had started doing all the talking for us. After he went to shower, I sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the manila envelope that held my wedding receipts. The ones I hadn't uploaded yet. Sorting them was supposed to be part of a loan application, but now it felt more like lining up exhibits in a courtroom. I didn't even notice Reuben standing behind me until he asked, "Didn't your mom promise 10 grand for the wedding?" His tone was careful, not accusing, just curious. "She did," I said, still staring at a receipt for the cake that never arrived. He waited. I looked up. She sent it to Lynn instead, for her image recovery event. He blinked. "I'm sorry, her what?" I shrugged. Some PR stunt mom put together after Lynn's divorce. Said she needed a fresh narrative, rented out a barn, invited a bunch of bloggers, hired a lifestyle photographer to shoot her arranging eucalyptus stems into a mason jar. She called it healing through curation. Reuben leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Your mom really said that?" "No," I replied. "She said, it's all the same pot. We're family." He didn't laugh. Neither did I. "No, it's not the same pot," I said. "It was always my name, my account, my silence." 2 days later, I had a video call with Melissa, a friend from college who I hadn't spoken to since Lynn's wedding. She'd reached out after seeing the viral clip, said she loved the vibe and wanted to catch up. The call was stiff. Melissa talked about her kids, her job, her Pilates certification. I nodded along, pretending to care. Then, just as we were about to wrap, she said it. "I always meant to ask, and I hope this isn't offensive, but are you adopted?" I blinked, letting the question hang in the air for a moment too long. "No," I said, smiling without humor. "But thanks for confirming it still looks that way." Her cheeks flushed. "Oh, I didn't mean—" I ended the call, didn't say goodbye, didn't wait for an apology. I closed the laptop, stood up, and walked to the living room. My body moved like it already knew what came next. I pulled out a blank sheet of paper and started writing. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't emotional. It was a letter to Linda. "You don't need to ask why I've pulled away. You already made that choice for me. You funded a show for Lynn. You robbed a vow from me. You chose the version of me that stayed quiet. The one that made things easy, that version is gone." I didn't send it, but I printed it, folded it neatly, and taped it behind the family photo that still hung near the front door. The one from Lynn's engagement party, where I was half cut from the frame. I left it there like a will, something to be found when the house was emptied and the dust settled. That evening, just after dinner, another message came through. This time, not from Linda's entourage, from Linda herself. "I'm tired of being the villain in your narrative. You've always been so ungrateful." I read it once. Then again. The punctuation, the tone, the way she made herself the victim in a story she wrote. I didn't reply. I didn't even roll my eyes. I simply took a screenshot, saved it to the folder I'd renamed Exhibit B. Then I closed the app and whispered to myself, she wanted the spotlight. I was about to give it to her, just not the way she imagined. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was upset, not even because of Linda's message, but because I was calm, too calm, and that calm carried weight, the kind that comes after you've made a decision and there's nothing left to argue. By morning, I had gathered everything, printed records, login timestamps, bank statements, screenshots, PDF attachments. There was no rage in my movements, no tremor in my hands, only precision. I slid each document into a labeled folder, clipped it shut, and placed it inside a canvas tote bag. Later that afternoon, I sat across from a paralegal at a modest law office in downtown Asheville. She had gray hair pulled back into a ponytail and wore glasses with chewed plastic frames. The kind of woman who had seen 1,000 cases like mine, but didn't act like it was routine. I laid out the stack in front of her. One by one, she examined them, marked up receipts, email confirmations, the credit card application using my name, my address, but Linda's phone number. "I didn't open this," I said plainly. She nodded, flipping the page. "This wasn't just identity misuse," she said, pushing the folder slightly back toward me. "This was deliberate, patterned. You understand this isn't just fraud, it's premeditated abuse." There was a part of me that wanted to ask, is that even a thing? Can you call it that when it's your own mother? But I didn't, because I already knew the answer. I filed the case through small claims, not because I needed a courtroom or applause, but because some things should be documented where people can't twist them later. The hearing took place on a rainy Thursday. Linda arrived alone, dressed in a light blue suit like she was attending a fundraiser. She had pearls around her neck and carried a white envelope clutched in both hands, as if to appear composed and cooperative. She didn't meet my eyes. I didn't offer hers a place to land. The judge listened carefully, methodical and bored, like this was no different than two neighbors fighting over a fence line. But when he ruled, he was firm. The respondent is liable for full restitution and associated costs. Evidence shows intentional use of a family member's financial identity for non-essential luxury expenses. Linda looked at me then, her expression tight, voice hushed but sharp. "You didn't have to make this public." I blinked, then said, just loud enough for her to hear, "Neither did you, but you did anyway." I walked out of the courtroom before she could respond. No backward glance, no need for a final word. Some silences are loud enough. A few days passed before I got a text from Vernon, my sister's ex-husband. He asked if we could meet for coffee, said there was something I needed to see. I hesitated, then agreed. We chose a quiet cafe near the river, a place where people didn't linger and no one would recognize us. He was already seated when I arrived. He looked older than I remembered, more tired, but lighter somehow. "I knew something was off," he said after the small talk faded. "Back then, when Linda insisted we change the gift registry behind your back." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter. "I wrote this a while ago, never sent it, but I figured, maybe you'd want it now." I opened it. It was a notarized statement. Detailed, specific, naming the vendors I'd paid for during Lynn's wedding, dates, amounts. His own confirmation that Linda had instructed the billing to be rerouted, while publicly claiming Lynn had funded the event solo. I didn't say anything at first. "I don't need it for court," I said finally, folding it again with care. "But I'm going to frame it." Vernon nodded. "Do it. You earned it." Back home, I placed the letter on the table, right beside the court documents. I didn't rush to frame it. Just seeing it there, solid, indisputable, felt like a door had closed without slamming. Later that evening, after folding laundry and answering a few work emails, I opened my banking app. One final scheduled transfer, $200 a month, set up years ago, just to help them out. A drip feed of silence. I canceled it. Then I created a new sub-account. I titled it Freedom Fund. It wasn't about the money. It was about marking the line between being used and being done. Reuben walked in with a photo frame in hand, the one I kept meaning to hang but always pushed off. "Where do you want this?" I didn't even glance up. "Anywhere there's sunlight." The frame went up that morning, just above the bookshelf where the light always poured in strongest after 9. Reuben stepped back and tilted his head, checking the alignment. "It's crooked," I said, smiling. "Then it's honest," he replied. I laughed softly. We left it that way. We'd been in the Portland house for almost 2 months. It was smaller, sure. No guest room, less kitchen counter. But there was space here. Not just physical space, but emotional. No one watched the front windows. No one knocked unannounced. Nothing haunted the corners. That morning, I was watering the plant Reuben had bought me when we first moved in. A little snake plant with one browning edge I hadn't been able to fix. The mail slid through the slot as I rinsed the watering can. Among the bills and flyers was a plain envelope. No return address. The handwriting on the front was familiar but hesitant. I opened it slowly, expecting some dry legal notice or outdated invitation. Instead, it was a photo. I recognized it instantly. Lynn's wedding, the one I'd erased from my phone, but not from memory. In the image, Lynn stood in the foreground, tossing her bouquet. The guests looked on, clapping, smiling, and there I was, barely in frame, slightly crouched, tray in hand, collecting champagne flutes. On the back, in the same careful handwriting, was one line. I looked right past you that day. I see you now. No name, but I knew. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger either, just a kind of stillness that settled around my ribs. I placed the photo face down on the counter and poured myself another cup of coffee. A few hours later, after folding laundry and answering a work email or two, I walked into the room where we kept the keepsakes. Photos from the wedding Reuben and I had actually planned. A shell we found on the beach during our road trip. A drawing from Sonia's daughter, taped beside a print of our backyard dance under the lanterns. I took the photo and slid it behind the image of our wedding night. Reuben spinning me barefoot in the grass, my face mid-laugh. I didn't text Lynn. I didn't post about it. I didn't shred it either. Some things don't need forgiveness. Just an ending. Later that day, I texted Sonia a picture of the frame under morning light. No caption, just the image. She replied with a thumbs up and a heart. Then Lorraine sent a message, completely unrelated, or maybe perfectly timed. They say time heals, she wrote. I think it just stops the bleeding. I stared at the message for a minute before replying, and I finally stopped asking them to hold the bandage. That evening, after dinner, I updated the Freedom Fund spreadsheet. Not because I needed to track anything urgent, but because creating something of my own still felt like resistance. At dusk, I stepped into the backyard. Our backyard now. The kind with uneven paving stones and a creaky gate, but just enough room for peace. One chair sat alone beneath the big maple tree. It had a wobbly leg and peeling paint, but it held weight just fine. I sat, reached into my jacket pocket, and pulled out a folded napkin. The same one I'd used years ago, wiping tables no one remembered me setting. I flattened it across my lap. The fabric still held the faintest scent of citrus. I looked out across the yard, not waiting for anyone, not missing anyone. They never had to see it. I just needed to know I wasn't invisible to myself. Before I close this chapter, let me say one last thing. Just between us. There's a point in life when you realize that being the one who always keeps the peace often means you're the one paying the price. And when that realization hits, it's not rage that follows. It's clarity. Quiet, steady, necessary clarity. I spent years trying to be small enough to fit into other people's comfort zones, until I understood that disappearing doesn't earn love. It earns silence. And that's not a fair trade. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of a time when you were erased, overlooked, or made to feel like your voice didn't belong, I hope you know now that your truth is not too loud. You are not too much. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is choosing yourself. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from a version of family that only worked when you stayed silent? Have you ever had to reclaim your own name, your own story? Tell me in the comments below. If this video touched your heart, drop a 1 in the comments, or let me know what city or state you're watching from. And if it didn't quite land with you, that's okay too. Tell me why. Tell me how you would have handled it. We're all learning from each other here. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories that dig deeper than headlines and echo something real inside you, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Don't miss the next one. You never know. The next story might sound a little like yours. Thank you for watching. And if no one has told you lately, You deserve to be heard.